SpaceX's internet communications satellite constellation Starlink is expected to deliver fast, low-latency internet service to different locations where ground-based internet is pretty unreliable, unavailable, or at least expensive. The very first phase of the constellation consists of 5 orbital shells. With that, SpaceX nails its 150th Falcon recovery attempt on Starlink Group 3-4. Also, if you're a bit unsure about whatever this means for the future, let us fill you in. First off, what does this imply for the future in space? Well, SpaceX's Starlink Group 3-4 mission is going to launch 46 Starlink satellites atop a Falcon 9 rocket. Now, the Falcon 9 is going to lift off from Space Launch Complex 4 East, right at the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, United States. Group 3-4 is going to mark the 57th operational mission of the Internet service, which is going to boost the total number of its satellites launched right up to 3,208, out of which almost 2,940 will still be in orbit around the Earth after their launch. Adding to that, this mission is also going to mark the 4th launch to the 3rd shell, and they need roughly 10 launches to fill Shell 3. Now, the Internet service is available in some approved regions, where people can order or pre-order the service. In fact, after 28 launches, SpaceX achieved near global service. At the same time, the constellation isn't going to be complete until at least 42,000 satellites are in orbit. Plus, right after it's complete, the venture can expect a profit of $30 to $50 billion annually. What's more, this profit is going to be able to finance SpaceX's very ambitious Starship program and even Mars base Alpha. Having said that, Starlink Group 3-4 marks the 110th orbital launch of 2022, which makes SpaceX account for at least a third of all orbital launches this year. Also, this was Falcon 9's 174th mission and 111th launch with a flight-proven booster. Up next, here's why this is a record. Now, the Starlink Group 3-4 missions use SpaceX's booster, B10637. In the mission, the 7 actually signifies the fact that it's the 7th flight of the very same booster. Plus, it's the one that also supported Sentinel-6A, the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, and 4 other Starlink missions in the past. As a matter of fact, the most recent mission was the Starlink Group 3-1, which flew just over 50 days ago. Moving on, right after stage separation, the booster made a landing 640 kilometers downrange on SpaceX's autonomous Spaceport drone ship. Now, this was its 150th Falcon recovery attempt and even marked its 65th consecutive landing, which is, by the way, a record, and 139th booster landing. With that said, inside the Falcon 9's 5.2-meter diamond payload fairing were actually 46 Starlink V1.5 satellites, which will be deployed into a 321 by 307 kilometer low Earth polar orbit at 97.66 degrees. Plus, the satellites are then going to spend months raising their orbit to the operational 560 kilometer circular orbit at 97.6 degrees, which is also known as Starlink Shell 3. In fact, the shell consists of 6 orbital planes, and every plane's got 58 satellites, so you've got a total of 348 satellites in all planes. As a result of the small size of this shell, the company expects that it'll be filled in fewer than 10 Falcon 9 launches, and could even be completed by the end of this year. And this might just change everything about communication. Their V1.5 satellites have a compact, flat-panel design that allows SpaceX to launch many at once. In fact, each of these satellites has a mass of almost 305 kilograms, and is even equipped with an inter-satellite laser communication system. With that, satellites can communicate directly with one another rather than going through traditional ground stations. Now, this is really important, especially for the satellites in the polar shells, due to their inability to build ground stations in such regions. Plus, it also allows for Starlink Maritime, which is basically Starlink for boats. Just a few days ago, on August 25th, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk and T-Mobile CEO Mike Sievert even announced that the next generation satellites, which they've named Starlink V2, is going to launch on SpaceX's Starship launch vehicle and will be able to act as cell towers. What's more, they're even going to communicate directly with most modern cellular devices. Adding to that, Musk noted that each satellite is going to have 2 to 4 megabits per second of throughput in every region. Satellites will be able to handle anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 calls at any one time, or even send millions of SMS text messages per second. At the same time, this isn't going to enable global data connection on phones, but it's going to allow people to communicate with emergency services and family members from anywhere in the world. Moving on, we might be looking at mini Starlink satellites soon. Now, at the very same press conference, Musk even added that because of all the delays delays in the Starship program, SpaceX is looking into making some sort of mini Starlink B2 satellites that would launch on the Falcon 9. Having said that, it's still not clear if the cell phone connectivity we mentioned earlier is also going to be available in the mini version of these satellites. At the same time, from a technical perspective, that's probably not possible because of the large antennas needed for a satellite to even hear the low-power signals from cell phones. Finally, here's what the launch sequence looks like. Falcon 9's launch sequence starts at T38 minutes, right when the launch director verifies that teams are ready for propellant loading, and 3 minutes later, both stages are going to be filled with chilled RP1. Moving on, the first stage begins being filled with super chilled liquid oxygen, or LOX for short. With that said, fueling on the second stage will be wrapped up at T20 minutes, right when SpaceX will then purge the transporter erector lines to prepare for the second stage LOX filling. That's going to start at T16 minutes. Right at T7 minutes, the first stage is going to flow a small amount of LOX through the turbo pump of the Merlin 1D engines to cool it before the full propellant flow at engine ignition. Finally, at T1 minute, the vehicle is going to enter startup, which is basically the automated launch sequence that's handed over from the ground computers to the vehicle's onboard computer. 3 seconds before liftoff, the vehicle commands the ignition of all 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the first stage. Moving on to T0.2 seconds, the engines will be at full power, and the vehicle checks the health of all the engines. Once they're all confirmed to be nominal, it's ready to go, and the vehicle commands the hydraulic launch clamps to release, allowing the vehicle to lift off from the pad. And in other related news, first off, after the court win, SpaceX presses FCC to clear second-generation Starlink network. Just last week, a U.S. appeals court rejected lawsuits from Dish Network and Viasat that basically tried to reverse an FCC order allowing SpaceX to operate 2814 first-generation Starlink satellites at lower orbits. In fact, just last week, SpaceX sent a letter to the very same agency arguing that the ruling shows why the FCC should dismiss any concerns Dish and Viasat have about the satellites. The company's letter even went on to note that SpaceX has been waiting for over 2 years for the FCC approval for their second-generation Starlink, which even promises to improve coverage and speeds for the popular satellite internet service. At the same time, it's facing a lot of opposition from many companies over its sheer size, which is simply going to dwarf any other satellite constellation before it. Anyway, in response to last week's ruling from the U.S. Appeals Court, Viasat says that the court's decision is a setback for safety and environmental protection. Up next, Royal Caribbean is putting SpaceX's Starlink on its cruise ships. The cruise company that also operates Celebrity Cruises and Silversea Cruises has also formally announced that it's going to be outfitting its fleet of ships with SpaceX's Starlink internet service. In fact, it says that the service is going to make the internet experience while at sea much faster, safer, and reliable. Now, it trialed the service on one of its ships over the summer, and it's going to be ready for the official launch on September 5th, starting with a ship called the Celebrity Beyond. Adding to that, the company expects to have the service fully deployed across its fleet by the first quarter of 2023. Finally, Elon Musk says he's agonized over the font design for Tesla and SpaceX. The billionaire businessman loves fonts and has even tweaked the logos over the years. In fact, he finally revealed that the SpaceX logo has got a hidden meaning representing a rocket's arc to orbit. Having said that, in a series of Sunday tweets, Musk said he agonized over the choice of fonts for his businesses because of a few similarities, specifically the use of negative space. Since he loves fonts and seems to have a pretty good eye for detail, they've made little tweaks over the years, but he still isn't satisfied. Now, the Tesla logo has a T-shaped design with a custom sans serif font that spells out the brand name, and it's supposed to resemble the cross-section of an electric motor. At the same time, the SpaceX logo is also written in a similar font, with an extended X that represents the reusable rockets made by the company. That's a wrap for this video. What's your take on SpaceX's 150th recovery attempt on Starlink Group 3-4? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.